The warship called Endless Conquest floated silently in the darkness of space. It was a massive vessel, nearly 2 kilometers long, covered in dark armor plates that had been scratched and burned by countless battles. The ship had traveled across hundreds of star systems and had helped conquer 12 different alien species. To the Empire, it was a symbol of their military power. Inside the ship, in a large recreation hall on the lower decks, a group of young soldiers had gathered around a holographic display table. There were about 15 of them, all recent graduates from the military academy on there. Their scales were still bright green, not yet faded to the darker colors that came with age and experience. Their eyes were eager and hungry for glory. The soldiers were looking at files that had been taken from a species called humans. They had been watching humans for almost 200 years, studying them from a distance, intercepting their communications and cultural broadcasts. Humans did not know they were being watched. They did not know that the Empire had already decided they would eventually be conquered like all the others. A young soldier named A was controlling the display. He was considered clever among his peers, always quick with a joke or an observation. He pulled up an image that showed a muscular human figure holding lightning bolts in his hands. The figure had a beard and wore flowing robes. "Look at this," A said, his mandibles clicking with amusement. The humans actually believed that their warriors could throw storms from their hands. They called this one Zeus, and they built temples to worship him. The other soldiers burst into laughter. Their chittering sounds filled the hall, bouncing off the metal walls. "That is nothing," said another soldier named. He reached over and changed the display to show a different image. This one depicted a warrior in ancient armor, holding a spear and shield. "This one is called Achilles. The humans believed he could not be hurt anywhere on his body except for his heel. Their stories say he killed thousands of enemies by himself." More laughter erupted from the group. One soldier pretended to limp around, acting like he had been struck in the heel and was dying dramatically. The others found this extremely funny. A larger soldier named Al pushed his way to the front of the group. He was bigger than the others, with broader shoulders and thicker arms. He had scored highest in physical combat at the academy and never let anyone forget it. "My favorite human myth," Al announced loudly, "is their concept of berserkers. These were supposedly warriors who felt no pain at all. They would enter battle without armor and fight with the strength of 10 normal soldiers. The humans claim these berserkers could not be stopped by any weapon." He made a dismissive gesture with his clawed hand. "Obviously, this is complete fantasy. No biological creature can ignore pain. It is a survival mechanism built into every living thing. The humans invented these stories because they are weak and needed to imagine themselves as strong." The other soldiers nodded in agreement. They had all been taught that they were the supreme species in the galaxy. Their scales were natural armor. Their claws could tear through metal. Their eyes could see in complete darkness. Compared to them, humans seemed soft and fragile, with their thin skin and dull teeth. I pulled up more images. He showed them human stories about warriors who returned from the dead. He showed them legends of soldiers who fought entire armies alone. He showed them tales of humans who survived wounds that should have killed them instantly. "It is all compensation," I explained, enjoying the attention of his audience. "Humans know they are physically inferior, so they create these myths to make themselves feel better. It is actually quite sad when you think about it." None of the young soldiers noticed the old commander sitting in the corner of the hall. Commander had been there for nearly an hour, sitting quietly in a chair that was partially hidden in shadow. He was old by standards, nearly 90 cycles, which was close to the end of a natural. His scales had faded from bright green to a dull gray-brown color. His body was covered in scars, dozens of them, each one representing a battle that had nearly killed him. He held a cup of bitter root tea in his clawed hands. The steam rose slowly from the liquid, curling in the recycled air of the ship. He had been listening to every word the young soldiers said. Had served the Empire for over 60 cycles. He had fought in more campaigns than he could count. He had watched species rise up against the Empire and fall. He had seen bravery and cowardice, victory and defeat. He had learned lessons that could not be taught in any academy. And he had encountered humans before. Once. It was an experience he had never forgotten. The young soldiers continued their mockery. Al was now imitating what he thought a human berserker would look like, stomping around and making exaggerated growling noises. The others laughed and encouraged him. They also believed in something called guardian angels, added, invisible spirits that would protect them from harm. Can you imagine being so primitive that you believed in invisible protectors? Perhaps we should conquer them quickly, suggested. Put them out of their misery. A species this deluded has no place among the stars. It was at this moment that a finally noticed commander. The old soldier was staring directly at him, and there was something in those ancient eyes that made us suddenly uncomfortable. Commander, called out, trying to hide his unease behind confidence. You have studied the humans longer than anyone in our fleet. Surely you find their mythology as amusing as we do. The hall grew quiet. The other soldiers turned to look at the old commander, some of them noticing him for the first time. There was something about his stillness, his silence, that demanded attention. Set down his cup of tea very slowly. The soft click of ceramic against metal was the only sound in the room. He rose from his chair, and despite his age, despite the stiffness in his joints, his presence seemed to fill the entire hall. I find nothing about humans amusing, he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried clearly to every ear. And I would advise all of you to remove that word from your vocabulary when discussing them. The young soldiers exchanged confused glances. This was not the response they had expected. Surely the commander would appreciate their observations about human weakness. Surely he would agree that humans were just another inferior species waiting to be conquered. Al stepped forward, his earlier confidence returning. With respect, Commander, we have reviewed their military capabilities thoroughly. Their ships are slower than ours. Their weapons are less powerful. Their armor technology is at least 3 generations behind our own. They have only one while we control hundreds of planets. By every measure, they are not a threat. Looked at the young soldier for a long moment. Something in his expression made Al want to step backward, though he fought the urge. Sit down, the old commander said quietly. All of you, sit down and listen. I am going to tell you a story about humans, a true story, and when I am finished, you will never laugh at their myths again. The soldiers found seats quickly, their earlier amusement completely gone. There was something in his voice, something heavy and dark, that told them they were about to hear something important. The old commander walked slowly to the center of the room, his clawed feet clicking softly against the metal floor. He stood before the holographic display that still showed images of human mythology. 37 cycles ago, he began, I was young like you, arrogant like you, certain of superiority like you, and I learned a lesson about humans that cost many good soldiers their lives. He paused, looking at each young face in turn. Pay attention. Your survival may depend on what I am about to tell you. Commander moved his claws across the holographic display, closing the images of human mythology and opening a different set of files. These were old military records, marked with classification symbols that the young soldiers had never seen before. The files were from a time before any of them had been born. I served under Fleet Admiral, began. Some of you may have heard his name. He was considered one of the greatest military minds in history. He conquered 6 species during his career and never lost a single major battle. The young soldiers nodded. They had studied campaigns at the academy. His tactics were still taught as examples of perfect military strategy. 37 cycles ago, Admiral commanded a patrol fleet in the Expanse. This region of space was close to human territory, though the humans did not know we were there. We had been observing them for over a century at that point, and the High Command wanted more direct information about their species. Pulled up a star chart showing the region of space he was describing. A small blue dot marked the location of human-controlled systems. A red line showed the patrol route of the fleet. One day, our sensors detected a human vessel that had strayed from its normal course. It was a colony ship, a large transport designed to carry civilians to new worlds. The ship was called the Dawning Hope. He brought up an image of the vessel. It was an ungainly thing by standards, a collection of cylindrical sections connected together, with large cargo pods attached to its sides. It looked more like a floating city than a proper spacecraft. There were approximately 4,000 humans aboard, families mostly, men, women, and children traveling to start a new life on a distant planet. They had wandered into space that we considered contested territory, though they had no way of knowing this. A raised a hand hesitantly. "Commander, what did Admiral do?" "He decided to capture the vessel," replied. "We wanted to study humans directly. We wanted to understand their biology, their psychology, their technology. A civilian ship with 4,000 subjects seemed like the perfect opportunity." The old commander's voice remained steady, but there was something dark in his eyes. "We disabled their engines with a precision strike. The humans had no weapons that could threaten our warships. Their vessel was helpless within minutes. Admiral ordered a boarding action with 300 warriors." He paused, letting the number sink in. 300 of our finest soldiers, warriors who had fought in dozens of campaigns, veterans who had killed members of species far more dangerous than humans appeared to be. We expected the operation to be simple. We expected the humans to surrender immediately. Al leaned forward. "How many security personnel did the humans have?" 47, answered. The Dawning Hope was a civilian vessel. It carried a small security team to handle minor problems during the voyage. They had basic weapons, no armor, and no military training beyond standard law enforcement procedures. The math was obvious to everyone in the room. 300 trained warriors against 47 human security officers. It should have been no contest at all. "What happened?" asked quietly. Was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "The boarding action was supposed to last 30 minutes at most. We had planned to secure the ship, separate the humans into groups, and transport them back to our vessels for study. Everything was calculated precisely." He looked at the young soldiers with an expression that was difficult to read. "The action lasted 11 hours. Confused murmurs spread through the group. 11 hours, against 47 lightly armed humans. Surely the commander was exaggerating. "I see the doubt in your eyes," said. "I would have doubted it myself if I had not been there. Let me tell you exactly what happened." He pulled up a schematic of the colony ship's interior, showing its corridors, living quarters, and cargo sections. "We breached the main airlock with standard explosive charges. The first team of 50 warriors moved inside, expecting to find frightened civilians ready to submit. Instead, they found a woman named Laura." The old commander spoke the human name carefully, as if it held special meaning. Laura was the chief of security aboard the Dawning Hope. She was small by human standards, barely reaching the chest of an average warrior. She had brown hair and green eyes and a face that looked gentle. Our warriors dismissed her as insignificant when they first saw her. He shook his head slowly. That was their first mistake. Brought up a recorded transmission, audio only. A human female voice came through the speakers, calm and controlled despite the sounds of weapons fire in the background. "All personnel, this is Chief. Fall back to defensive positions at Bulkhead 7. Seal all doors behind you. Engineering team disable the internal transport system. Medical team establish a triage point in Cargo Bay 4. Everyone else protect the children. Do not engage unless engaged. Make them pay for every step. The recording ended. The young soldiers sat in stunned silence. She organized her people in less than 2 minutes, continued. While our warriors were still forming up inside the airlock, she had already created a defensive strategy. The humans retreated not because they were afraid, but because they were preparing. He traced lines on the schematic, showing the human movements. They welded doors shut using construction equipment. They built barricades from furniture, cargo containers, and pieces of the ship itself. They created where our numerical advantage meant nothing. They turned their home into a fortress. I found his voice, but surely our weapons could cut through their barricades. Yes, agreed. We could cut through, but every time we breached a barricade, we found humans waiting on the other side. They had positioned themselves in ways that forced us to come through one at a time. They had improvised weapons from mining equipment and industrial tools. They fought with a fury that none of us had ever seen. He pulled up another file, this one containing casualty reports. In the first hour, we lost 23 warriors, not wounded, dead, killed by civilians with makeshift weapons. By the second hour, Admiral had to send reinforcements. By the fourth hour, he had committed every warrior on the ship. The old commander looked directly at Al. You spoke of berserkers earlier. You laughed at the idea of warriors who felt no pain. Let me tell you about a human named Daniel. He brought up a single image. It showed a human male, unremarkable in appearance with dark hair and brown eyes. He was smiling in the photograph, looking relaxed and happy. Daniel was a maintenance worker on the Dawning Hope. He had no military training. He had never held a weapon before that day. When we broke through the barricade at Section 12, he was the only human left to defend the corridor behind it. His voice became very quiet. He held that corridor for 40 minutes, alone, with nothing but a metal pipe. The young soldiers stared at him in disbelief. Our warriors shot him, they cut him, they broke his bones. He kept fighting. He would not stop. He could not stop. Behind him, there were 200 civilians trying to escape to safer sections of the ship. He knew that if he fell, they would die. The old commander closed his eyes briefly. It took 6 of our warriors to finally bring him down. 3 of those warriors never fought again. The injuries they received from a human with a metal pipe ended their military careers. And in those 40 minutes, every single civilian behind him escaped. He opened his eyes and looked at the young soldiers. That is not a myth. That is what humans are capable of when they are protecting their own. And Daniel was not special. He was not a trained warrior. He was just a human who decided that he would not allow others to be harmed while he still had breath in his body. The recreation hall was completely silent. No one was laughing anymore. Commander walked slowly among the seated soldiers, his clawed feet making soft sounds against the metal floor. The young watched him with new eyes now. The mockery that had filled the room earlier was gone, replaced by something that felt like the beginning of fear. Daniel was not unique, the old commander continued. He was simply the first example I witnessed personally. Let me tell you about the others. He stopped beside the holographic display and pulled up medical reports from the archives. The files were marked with warnings about disturbing content. During the boarding action, we captured and wounded many humans. Our medics examined them, trying to understand how such a weak-looking species could fight so effectively. What they discovered changed everything we thought we knew about biology. Selected a specific report and projected it for all to see. Humans have a chemical system in their bodies that activates during extreme stress. They call it the fight or flight response, but that name does not capture what it truly does. When a human believes that they or their loved ones are in mortal danger, Their bodies release a flood of chemicals that transform them. He highlighted several sections of the medical data. Their heart rate increases dramatically, pumping more blood to their muscles. Their pain receptors become suppressed, allowing them to continue fighting through injuries that would disable any warrior. Their strength increases beyond normal limits. Their reaction time improves. Their fear temporarily disappears. Raised a trembling hand. How long can they maintain this state? That is what terrified our medics, replied. In most species, such a response lasts only seconds. The body cannot sustain it, but humans can maintain this state for hours if the threat continues. Their bodies essentially destroy themselves in the process, burning through energy and causing internal damage, but they do not care. They cannot care. The chemicals in their blood override their self-preservation instincts. He pulled up images from the boarding action, recorded by helmet cameras worn by warriors. The soldiers in the room watched in silence as humans with terrible wounds continued to fight, continued to move, continued to protect the people behind them. We shot a woman named Maria Santos 7 times, narrated as the footage played. 7 times. She was bleeding so heavily that our medics later said she should have been dead from blood loss alone, but she kept firing her weapon. She kept standing between our warriors and the children she was protecting. The footage showed a human female propped against a wall, her clothing soaked with blood, still raising a weapon with hands that should not have been able to move. When we finally reached her, she was clinically dead. Her heart had stopped beating, but her finger was still on the trigger of her weapon. Her body had continued to function for several minutes after her brain should have shut down. Al, who had been so confident earlier, looked pale beneath his scales. That is impossible. I thought so too, agreed. I demanded an investigation. I accused the medics of making errors in their reports, but they showed me the evidence. They showed me the biological data, and I had to accept that what I had witnessed was real. He turned off the footage and faced the young soldiers directly. Your berserkers were not myth. They were description. Humans did not invent stories about warriors who felt no pain. They were recording their own history. They were describing what they had actually seen in their own species. The old commander moved to another section of files. Let me tell you about their healing abilities. After the battle, we kept several wounded humans for study. We expected them to die from their injuries. Instead, we watched them recover. He showed medical charts tracking human recovery rates. A human named Porter had suffered wounds that would have killed any within hours. Multiple broken bones, severe internal bleeding, damage to vital organs. We gave him no treatment because we wanted to observe the natural progression of his injuries. Shook his head slowly. Within 3 days, he had stabilized himself. His body began redirecting resources to repair the damage. His bones started to knit together. His internal bleeding slowed and then stopped. Within 2 weeks, he was conscious and alert. Within a month, he could walk again. He looked at the shocked faces around him. We have medical technology that can heal such wounds. Humans did this with nothing but their own biology. Their bodies are designed to survive. They are designed to endure damage that would kill most species and then repair themselves. Evolution made them this way. I spoke up hesitantly. Commander, you mentioned that this was their fight or flight response. Does that mean they can also choose to run away? Turned to face the young soldier. Yes, they can choose to flee. Individual humans will sometimes retreat from danger to save themselves. But here is what you need to understand about their species. He paused to make sure everyone was listening. When humans are protecting others, especially their families and children, the flight option disappears. It is not that they choose to stay and fight. It is that their biology removes the choice entirely. They become incapable of running. They become incapable of surrender. They become incapable of any action that would leave their loved ones undefended. The old commander walked back to the holographic display. Laura, the security chief I mentioned earlier, gave us a recording before she died. It was intended for her daughter, who was somewhere else in the galaxy. She recorded it during a brief pause in the fighting, knowing she would not survive. He played the audio. A woman's voice filled the room, tired but steady. "Hey, sweetheart, I know you are going to hear about what happened here, and I want you to understand something. These aliens think they know what humans are. They look at us and see a weak species. They see soft skin and small bodies. They have no idea what they walked into. We are not going to win this fight. I know that. But we are going to make them pay for every life they take. We are going to teach them that humans are not prey. We are going to make them remember the dawning hope for the rest of their existence. I love you, baby. Be strong, be kind. And if anyone ever threatens the people you love, show them exactly what a human being is capable of. Mom out." Stop the recording. The silence in the hall was absolute. Laura fought for another 4 hours after she made that recording. She killed 11 warriors personally. When she finally fell, she fell on top of the entrance to a shelter where 63 children were hiding. Our warriors had to move her body to reach the door. He looked at the young soldiers with ancient eyes. The children inside were unharmed, every single one, and her team had protected them completely. Those 47 security officers saved over 3,000 lives by refusing to surrender, refusing to run, refusing to die until the civilians were safe. Ask the question that everyone was thinking: what happened to the humans who survived? "We returned them," answered. Admiral wanted to keep them for study, but the High Command overruled him. They had seen the battle reports. They understood that if word spread about what we had done, if humans learned that they had attacked a civilian ship, we might face a response we were not prepared for. He turned off the display. The survivors were given a false story about an engine malfunction and a rescue by an unknown alien species. They were returned to human space with their memories chemically altered. Most of them do not remember what really happened. The old commander's voice grew darker. But one of them did remember. One of them refused to forget. And that is where our story becomes truly frightening. The young soldiers sat in complete silence as Commander prepared to continue his story. The recreation hall that had been filled with laughter just an hour ago now felt like a different place entirely. The shadows seemed darker. The air felt heavier, and the old commander's presence dominated the room. "Laura had a son," began. "His name was. He was 16 years old when we attacked the Dawning Hope. He was not aboard the ship when it happened. He was on Earth there, attending an educational institution." The commander pulled up an image of a young human male. He had the same green eyes as his mother. When the survivors returned, was told that his mother had died in an engine accident. The official story was that the ship had suffered a catastrophic failure and that Chief had died helping to save passengers. She was given honors by the human authorities. There was a memorial service, attended with tears in his eyes. Walked slowly around the room as he spoke, but did not believe the story. He knew his mother. He knew she would have left some kind of message if she had time. He began investigating on his own, quietly, carefully. He spent years gathering information, talking to survivors, looking for inconsistencies in the official reports. The old commander stopped and faced the young soldiers. "He found us. It took him 8 years, but he found evidence that the Dawning Hope had been attacked by an alien species. He found traces of technology on recovered debris. He found gaps in the survivors' memories that pointed to chemical manipulation. He pieced together the truth." I shifted uncomfortably. What did he do with this information? "He did not go to the human authorities," replied. "He knew they would not believe him, or if they did believe him, they would try to stop him. He had a different plan, a human plan." The commander brought up personnel files from the military archives. Spent the next 6 years preparing. He joined the human military and excelled. He transferred to their Special Operations Division, the most elite combat units in their entire species. He learned every skill they could teach him, and then he learned more on his own. His voice grew heavy. He learned our language. He studied our culture. He analyzed our tactics and strategies. He identified our weaknesses. All of this he did while serving in the human military, hiding his true purpose from everyone around him. The old commander pulled up a new file, this one marked with the highest security classifications. 14 years after the attack on the Dawning Hope, Admiral was assassinated on his flagship. The young soldiers gasped. Admiral was a legend. His death was recorded in history as a mysterious incident, never fully explained. 8 humans infiltrated the flagship Eternal Glory, continued. We still do not know exactly how they got aboard. Our security systems detected nothing. Our sensors found no evidence of intrusion. One moment, everything was normal. The next moment, 8 humans were moving through the ship like ghosts. He displayed the security footage, grainy and distorted. The ship carried a crew of 2,000 trained warriors. The humans moved through them like they were not there. They used our own corridors against us. They created diversions and false alarms. They exploited weaknesses in our procedures that we did not even know existed. The footage showed brief glimpses of shadowy figures moving through hallways, appearing and disappearing like spirits. They reached Admiral's quarters in less than an hour. His personal guards never saw them coming. 4 guards were killed silently before they could raise an alarm. The 5th managed to activate an emergency signal, but by then it was too late. His claws tightened, walked into Admiral's quarters and killed him with a blade. The same blade his mother had carried on the Dawning Hope. Laura's personal knife had been recovered from her body and stored in our archives as a trophy, had somehow retrieved it years earlier during his investigation. The old commander looked at the young soldiers with an expression that mixed respect with fear. He carved a message into the Admiral's body, 4 words in our own language: "You took my mother." The room was absolutely still. No one dared to move or speak. 6 of the 8 humans died escaping from the ship. Was not among the dead. He and 1 other operative made it back to human space. The High Command launched a massive investigation, but we never found them. They disappeared completely. Al found his voice. Surely this was an isolated incident, one human with exceptional skills and motivation. Turned to look at the young warrior. That is what the High Command wanted to believe. They told themselves that was unique, that no other human would be capable of such a thing, that we could continue our plans to eventually conquer their species. He shook his head slowly. They were wrong. Over the following years, 7 more commanders who had participated in the attack on the Dawning Hope died in similar circumstances. 7 different incidents, 7 different methods. Some were poisoned. Some died in accidents that seemed natural until we investigated closely. Some simply disappeared and were never found. The commander pulled up a list of names and dates. All of them had one thing in common. They had been involved in the decision to attack the colony ship. They had blood on their hands from that day, and someone was hunting them, one by one, making them pay for what they had done. I looked at the list with growing horror. Was it doing all of this? We do not know, admitted. Some of the incidents happened in different parts of the galaxy at nearly the same time. It would have been impossible for one person to be responsible for all of them. We believe that shared his knowledge with others. We believe he trained them. We believe he created a network of humans dedicated to hunting anyone who harmed the survivors of the Dawning Hope. The old commander walked back to the center of the room. Humans have a concept they call blood debt. When you harm their families, they do not forget. They do not forgive. They do not move on with their lives and accept what happened. They pass their vengeance down through generations like a sacred inheritance. He looked at each young soldier in turn. I was junior enough during the attack that I was not considered a target. My name was not on their list, but I knew people who were on that list. I watched them live in fear for years, never knowing when the humans would come for them. Some of them begged to be transferred to remote outposts. Some of them retired early and tried to hide. It did not matter. The humans found them all. Spoke up nervously. How did the High Command respond to this? They debated, replied bitterly. They argued. Some wanted to launch an immediate attack on human space to destroy them before they became a greater threat. Others pointed out that if humans could do this with a handful of operatives, what might they do if we gave them a real reason to fight? He paused. In the end, the High Command chose to do nothing. They decided that the safest approach was to avoid provoking humanity further. They classified all information about the Dawning Hope incident. They pretended it never happened, and they hoped that if we left the humans alone, they would eventually forget about us. The old commander's expression was grave. But here is what the High Command failed to understand. Humans do not forget. Their culture is built on remembering. They teach their children about events that happened thousands of years ago. They celebrate victories from ancient times. They mourn losses that occurred before their great-grandparents were born. He turned off the display, leaving the room in dimmer light. Somewhere out there is still alive, or if he is dead, his students are alive, and they are still watching us, still waiting, still ready to strike if we ever threaten their species again. Looked at the young soldiers with eyes that had seen too much. That is the price of underestimating humans. That is what happens when you harm their families. That is why I find nothing about them amusing. Commander stood before the young soldiers one final time. The recreation hall that had been filled with mockery was now heavy with silence and the weight of terrible knowledge. The holographic display was dark. The only light came from the dim emergency strips along the walls, casting long shadows across the room. The old commander looked at the faces before him. He saw fear in their eyes now, real fear, the kind that came from understanding a truth that could not be unknown. He remembered when he had worn that same expression, decades ago, standing in the bloody corridors of the Dawning Hope. I have told you this story for a reason, said quietly. It is not to frighten you, though I know it has. It is not to make you hate humans, though some of you may now fear them. I tell you this because you need to understand what we may soon be facing. He walked slowly around the room, passing each young soldier. The High Command is currently debating whether to begin direct engagement with human space. There are admirals who look at their inferior technology and see easy conquest. There are politicians who look at their single and imagine quick subjugation. They believe that humans are just another species waiting to be added to our empire. Stopped and turned to face the group. These admirals and politicians have never seen what a human is capable of. They have never watched a man hold a corridor alone with nothing but a metal pipe. They have never seen a woman fight for 20 minutes after she should have been dead. They have never felt the terror of knowing that somewhere in the galaxy, a human is hunting them with patience that spans decades. He shook his head with genuine sadness. They are fools, and their foolishness may doom us all. Al spoke up, his earlier confidence completely gone. Commander, surely our military strength would be enough. We have conquered 17 species. Our fleet is larger than anything humans possess. Numbers, replied. You think this is about numbers. Let me tell you what numbers meant on the Dawning Hope. He began counting on his clawed fingers. 300 warriors against 47 security officers. We had overwhelming force. We had better weapons, better armor, better training. By every calculation, we should have won in minutes. His voice hardened. We lost 83 warriors that day. 83 trained soldiers killed by civilians with improvised weapons. Our casualties were nearly double their entire defensive force. And we did not capture the ship through superior tactics. We captured it because they eventually ran out of people to sacrifice. The old commander walked to the center of the room. Now multiply that across an entire species. Humanity has billions of people on there alone. They have colonies spread across dozens of star systems. Every single one of them carries the same biological capability I described to you. Every single one of them could become what Daniel and Laura became if we threatened their families. He looked up at the ceiling, as if seeing something far beyond the metal hull. The humans have been watching the galaxy for a long time. They have seen species like us expand and conquer. They have studied our tactics, our technology, our weaknesses. And while we have been laughing at their myths, they have been preparing. Raised a trembling hand. Preparing how? I do not know exactly, admitted. Our intelligence on their military capabilities is limited. They hide much from us. But I can tell you what I believe based on what I have seen. He began listing points on his claws. They have been developing weapons specifically designed to counter technology. They have been training soldiers in tactics that exploit our psychological weaknesses. They have been studying our social structures to understand how to break our morale, and they have been waiting for us to make the first move. The old commander's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. Humans do not want war. They are not an aggressive species by nature. They prefer to build, to explore, to create. But when war comes to them, when someone threatens their homes and families, they become something else entirely. They become the things their myths describe. He looked at each young soldier directly. Zeus was not a fantasy about throwing lightning. He was a memory of humans who controlled the most powerful weapons of their ancient times and used them without mercy against their enemies. Achilles was not a story about invulnerability. He was a description of warriors who refused to acknowledge their own wounds until victory was achieved. Their berserkers were real. Their guardian spirits were the memory of ancestors who sacrificed everything so their descendants could survive. Walked toward the exit, then stopped at the threshold. I have seen 17 species fall to the hegemony. All of them had superior technology to humans at the time of their conquest. All of them had larger populations. All of them had better defenses and more strategic advantages. And all of them shared one trait that made them conquerable. What trait? Asked, his voice barely audible. They knew when to surrender. The old commander let the words hang in the silent air. Every species we have conquered eventually reached a point where they calculated that continuing to fight would cost more than submitting. They made the rational choice to preserve what they could. They accepted defeat because defeat was better than extinction. He shook his head slowly. Humans will not do this. It is not in their biology. It is not in their culture. When you push them to the edge, they do not fall. They dig in. They adapt. They find ways to hurt you that you never imagined, and they never ever stop. Gripped the edge of the doorframe with his claws. We have spent 2 centuries watching humans and believing we understood them. We have analyzed their technology and found it inferior. We have studied their military and found it smaller. We have observed their society and found it chaotic. And from all of this observation, we have concluded that they would be easy to conquer. His voice grew heavy with warning. But we have missed the most important thing. We have failed to understand what humans truly are. They are not a species defined by their technology or their numbers. They are defined by something else entirely, something that cannot be measured or calculated or predicted. He turned to look at the young soldiers one final time. The hegemony has never lost a war, but we have also never fought a species that treats war as a personal relationship. To us, conquest is business. It is expansion and resources and strategic advantage. To humans, war is family. War is protecting the people they love. War is avenging the ones they have lost. Step through the doorway. So laugh at their myths if you wish. Mock their stories of impossible warriors and undying heroes. But remember my words when you face them in battle. Remember them when you see a human who should be dead still fighting. Remember them when their children come for you decades later to settle debts you thought forgotten. His final words echoed through the hall as he walked away into the dim corridor. There is nothing in this universe more dangerous than a human protecting their family. That is not myth. That is not exaggeration. That is the only truth about humanity you will ever need to know. The door slid closed behind him, leaving the young soldiers alone with their thoughts. They sat in silence for a long time, each one remembering the laughter that had filled this room just hours ago. None of them felt like laughing anymore. And somewhere in the galaxy, across the vast emptiness of space, billions of humans went about their daily lives, building, creating, loving their families, unaware that an alien empire was debating whether to attack them. Unaware but not unprepared. Because the stories they told their children were not fantasies, they were instructions. They were reminders of what humans could become when everything they loved was threatened. And deep in the human heart, sleeping but never gone, was the spirit of every warrior who had ever stood between their family and destruction. Waiting, ready, human.